Hi, welcome to Lies and Secrets channel. We hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching. I never imagined I'd find myself at this crossroads where the tranquil life I once treasured would be profoundly disrupted. Our home, previously a haven of love and laughter, now resembled a stage for a drama. With me unwittingly cast as the protagonist, the scent of old books, the gentle snoring of Milo, they all seemed to murmur secrets I desperately wanted to keep concealed. However, last night the veil was lifted and I found myself standing in the stark light of truth as I walked away from our home. The burden of my decision weighed heavily upon me, each step resonating with a question. What would happen when Juniper discovered the extent of my loneliness? The lengths I had gone to feel understood? The answer loomed like the first drops of a looming storm in Willow Creek, where the hills undulate softly and the trees whisper secrets to the breeze. There stood a house that seemed alive, bathed in the soft hues of twilight. Home to Juniper and Milo. I recall the first time I laid eyes on Juniper. Her nut hair flowed down her back like a waterfall, and her eyes, oh, her eyes. They held layers of stories like ancient scrolls, secreted away in a library's depths. She was the librarian, the guardian of narratives, her gentle nature sharply contrasting the burdens she bore. Milo, meanwhile, was a man of substance and strength. His broad shoulders and warm smile reflecting his work at the local factory. He was the engineer, the builder, the one who ensured everything functioned harmoniously. Together they epitomized domestic bliss. Their home is sanctuary, infused with the aroma of old books, laughter, and the occasional bark of their German shepherd. Milo wasn't merely a pet, he was Juniper's shadow, her silent guardian. His gaze, deep and perceptive, followed her every move as if he could peer through her poised facade to the anguish she harbored within. Juniper was a mystery, a conundrum enshrouded in the soft fabric of her cardigans. She seldom spoke of her past, only once hinting at a tragic accident that claimed her parents when she was merely a child. This loss shaped her, hollowing out recesses within her soul that she filled with books, silence, and the love she found with Milo. Their life together resembled a finely tuned symphony, each note struck with exactitude and affection. Yet even in the most harmonious melodies, moments of dissonance sometimes arise, tracing the spines of the books that line the shelves, each title a familiar friend. The early morning light filtered through the windows, casting a serene glow across the room. There I settled into the rhythm of the day, the quiet enveloping me like a comforting embrace. That evening, as the sun set, painting the sky with hues of fire and gold, I found myself in their living room. Milo was away at work, the distant hum of machinery barely audible in our peaceful abode. Juniper was nestled in her favorite chair, a book cradled in her lap, her gaze deeply immersed in the story. Milo, ever faithful, lay at her feet, his head resting on her slippers, his eyes steadfastly fixed on her face. The room glowed softly under the lamp's light, casting long shadows that danced to the flicker of the fire. It was during this tranquil moment that I perceived something unsettling, a slight tremor in Juniper's hand as she turned the page, a brief flicker of fear crossing her expression, fleeting yet profound. Milo, attuned to her emotions, raised his head, his ears alert, his body tense. He too sensed the underlying tension, an unspoken dread that threatened to unravel the tranquility of their existence. As the night deepened, the house seemed to hold its breath. The usual creaks of settling wood and the gentle snoring of Milo were replaced by a palpable tension. Juniper appeared to wrestle with an unseen adversary, her eyes shifting between the door and her book, seeking solace in the written words. Then there came a knock, a sharp, insistent rap that reverberated through the house like a gunshot. Juniper's book dropped to the floor, her complexion palling as Milo stood. His hackles raised, growling lowly, his gaze locked on the door. Time seemed to suspend, awaiting the next moment in this unexpected drama. Juniper approached the door, her movements rigid, her eyes wide with apprehension, her hand paused at the knob, her breath shallow. The secret she had kept buried was about to surface, threatening the facade of their idyllic life. As she opened the door, the cool night air rushed in, carrying with it the promise of impending revelations that would test everything they believed in. What awaited her in the dark beyond was a reality neither she nor I could have ever predicted. It was a typical Wednesday morning when Milo had left for work. His kiss lingering on my forehead, a promise of chocolate from the factory's gift shop still hanging in the air. I watched his car fade into the morning mist, then turned back to the sanctuary of our home. The silence pressed heavily around me as I made my way to the kitchen, the routine of brewing tea offering a moment of solace. Kettle whistled a solitary tune, and with a mug warming my hands, I wandered into the library, my fingers grazing the books that were my silent companions in the quiet morning hours, tracing the bindings, each volume a confidant in my solitary existence today. However, the books seemed to whisper with a different tone. Their comforting stories felt remote, as if they were echoing from another world. I nestled into my favorite chair by the window, the light ideal for reading. Milo, sensing my disquiet, padded over and rested his head in my lap, his deep understanding eyes reflecting my inner upheaval as I caressed his fur. Each stroke was a silent dialogue between us, yet my mind drifted away like a leaf swept up by the wind to corners I avoided in the daylight. Memories long suppressed began to resurface, memories from before Willow Creek, before Milo. Before the security of this home, the silence deepened the library walls, seeming to inch closer, and the books, once my refuge, now appeared as mute spectators to the storm brewing within me. I could feel the weight of my past, the secrets I had concealed. Pressing against the fragile dam of my composure, Milo's ears pricked up. His body tensed as if he too could detect the changing air. His gaze remained locked on me, his eyes probing, asking questions I was not yet prepared to face, inhaling deeply. The scent of aged paper and leather bindings filled my lungs, anchoring me for a moment. But then something inside me shattered. The tea, now cold, was pushed aside as I stood abruptly, the chair's legs scraping against the wooden floor. Milo recoiled, his tail tucked, his expression one of confusion and concern. I couldn't remain here, not with these haunting thoughts, not in this oppressive silence. I needed to act, to do something, anything to shatter the spell of overwhelming solitude. My steps quickened, almost desperate, as I paced through the house, my heart thudding with a decision both inevitable and daunting. I snatched my coat, my keys, and with one last look at Milo, who now sat by the door, I resolved to leave. "I'll be back," I whispered to him, more to reassure myself than him. The door creaked open, the cool morning air brushing against my flushed cheeks. I didn't know where I was headed, only that I needed to escape. The town of Willow Creek was stirring to life. Yet I felt as though I were traversing a dream, each step propelling me further from the life I had known, from the safety of my routines. The road stretched before me, a metaphor for the journey I was embarking on, one that promised to alter everything. What actions I would take next, where I would find myself, remained as mysterious to me as the secrets I harbored. But one certainty prevailed: the tranquil existence I had crafted with Milo, the sanctuary of our home, was about to be irrevocably disrupted, and as I walked away, leaving the house behind, the weight of my decision descended upon me, like the first drops of an inevitable storm to see Milo coming down. His expression confused, or perhaps knowing the night seemed to stretch on endlessly, each second an eternity as I waited, breath held, tension coiling in my stomach. The living room, once a place of solace, now felt like a stifling cage. The dim light continued to cast eerie shadows, the flickering flames of the fire throwing grotesque shapes against the walls, mirroring the turmoil inside me. Milo, always a source of comfort, now seemed a reminder of the boundary I had nearly crossed. His head still rested in my lap, his warmth a stark contrast to the cold fear that now gripped me. The soft ticking of the grandfather clock was no longer a comforting heartbeat, but a ticking time bomb counting down the seconds to potential disaster. Milo's eyes, those deep pools of understanding, watched me, his gaze heavy with an emotion that was difficult to read. Was it judgment, or simply the unconditional love he always offered? His body shifted slightly, pressing closer, as if offering reassurance or seeking it from me. I found myself frozen, caught between the desire to embrace the comfort he offered and the fear of what I had allowed myself to consider. The silence of the house was oppressive, the occasional creak and moan of the old woodwork sounding like whispers of judgment. My mind raced with the possible consequences of my actions. What if Milo had awakened? What if he had come downstairs and seen us? Questions plagued me, each one adding weight to the heavy silence I needed to move to break the tension that bound me to the chair. My movements were stiff, as I gently nudged Milo off my lap and stood. The room felt colder, now the fire's warmth, doing little to chase away the chill that had settled inside me. I walked to the window, peering out into the darkness, searching for a sign, any indication of what the morning might bring. But the night offered no answers, only reflections of my own turmoil. I turned back to Milo, who now sat watching me with a tilt of his head, his tail thumping slowly against the floor. The simple act so typical of him brought a surge of tears to my eyes. I knelt beside him, burying my face in his fur, seeking forgiveness, understanding, or perhaps just the strength to face whatever came next. As the night wore on, the house gradually settled back into its usual rhythms, the eerie tension slowly ebbing away, but the echo of my heartbeat still sounded loudly in my ears, a relentless reminder of the line I had danced upon. The darkness outside seemed less oppressive, and as the first hints of dawn began to color the sky, I made a silent promise to myself and to Milo. Never again would I allow loneliness and curiosity to lead me into such perilous territory. The dawn was coming, and with it a chance to start anew, to mend the fragile threads of trust and respect that had held my life together, that back to reveal a scene I never expected to witness. Juniper's connection with Milo, while deeply affectionate, now bore a significance that I struggled to reconcile with the life we had built together. The intimacy of their interaction, so at odds with the mundane setting of our kitchen, left me feeling like an outsider peering into a private world I was never meant to see as I stood there, my feet rooted to the spot. The silence was almost tangible, broken only by the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Juniper, oblivious to my presence, continued her quiet communion with Milo. Her actions tender yet profound, the bond they shared usually a source of joy, now seemed to mock the simplicity of our domestic life. The impact of this realization was paralyzing. It wasn't just the act itself, but the implications it held for our relationship. Had I been so blind, so engrossed in my own routines and concerns that I had missed the signs of her deepening solitude? Was this merely a manifestation of some unspoken need, a way to fill a void I had failed to notice? My initial shock slowly gave way to a flood of emotions. Confusion, betrayal, sadness. This was not the Juniper I thought I knew, not the partner I believed I had in life. The intimacy she shared with Milo, her gentle whispers, and the way he responded with such understanding all pointed to a depth of connection that went beyond simple companionship. Finally, mustering the courage, I cleared my throat, my voice a strained whisper in the charged atmosphere. "Juniper," my question hung in the air. Heavy with implications, she turned, her expression one of surprise, quickly shifting to apprehension as she realized I had witnessed their interaction. The moment stretched between us, filled with unmasked questions and unsaid words. Her eyes, normally so clear and communicative, now seemed to hold layers of secrets, her gaze flitting between me and Milo. The beautiful dog, sensing the change in mood, moved slightly away. His loyalty divided George's eye. Juniper began, her voice faltering. The simplicity of her address, using my name so formally, felt like a chasm opening between us. I raised a hand, stopping her explanations. "I need to understand, Juniper, what's happening here." My voice was calm, but inside my emotions churned like a storm. She sighed, a deep, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of her inner turmoil. "It's not what it looks like," she said slowly, her eyes pleading for understanding. "It's complicated more than anything. It's loneliness, a kind of companionship. It's not about betraying you, George, it's about something, missing something I couldn't even name until now." Her words, meant to explain, only deepened my confusion. How had our life together come to this? The warmth and mutual support that had defined our relationship seemed to crumble under the weight of her revelation. I struggled to grasp the scope of her loneliness, the hidden layers of her life that had led to this moment. "We need to talk. Juniper, really talk." I said, the urgency of the situation pressing down on us, not just about what I saw, but about us, about what we both need from this relationship. Juniper nodded, her face a mixture of relief and fear, as if my willingness to discuss things offered a ray of hope. Milo, now back at her side, looked up at us both. His presence a silent reminder of the complexity of human emotions and the unexpected ways they manifest. As we moved to sit down, the kitchen, once a place of shared meals and laughter, felt like a sanctuary of sorts, offering us a chance to mend the cracks that had appeared in our foundation. The journey ahead would be difficult, filled with honest conversations and potentially painful revelations, but it was a necessary path if we were to salvage the life we had built together. As the night deepened, the house seemed to hold its breath, the usual sounds of settling wood and the gentle snoring of Milo replaced by a palpable tension. George had long since gone to bed, his steady breathing a distant echo from the upstairs bedroom. I found myself alone in the living room, the dim light casting shadows that danced with the flickering of the fire. Milo, ever attentive, moved closer to me, his presence both comforting and stirring something deep within. The room was quiet, save for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock, each tick a heartbeat in the silence. Milo's eyes, those deep pools of understanding, watched me intently, as if he could see through the veil of my composed exterior to the pain I kept locked away. His head rested on my lap, his warmth seeping through my clothes, a stark contrast to the cold loneliness that had enveloped me in that moment. With the world outside asleep and the house wrapped in its own cocoon of silence, I felt an overwhelming urge to connect, to feel something real, something tangible. My fingers, trembling slightly, began to stroke Milo's fur, each stroke a silent conversation between us. But as the night wore on, my touch lingered, becoming more deliberate, more intimate. I found myself leaning closer to him, my breath catching as I whispered his name, the sound barely audible over the clock ticking. Milo's response was immediate, his body shifting to press against me. His eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that mirrored my own. It was as if he understood, as if he could sense the storm brewing within me. My actions, driven by a complex mix of affection, loneliness, and a dark curiosity about my own desires, began to blur the lines of companionship. I let my guard down, allowing myself to explore this forbidden territory. Milo, ever loyal, seemed to accept this new dynamic. His tail wagging slowly, his breath warm against my skin. The interaction, initially innocent, escalated into something more intimate. My hands moved with a life of their own, exploring the contours of his form, feeling the strength beneath his fur. There was a part of me that knew this was wrong, that this crossed boundaries I had never dared to approach before. But another part, a deeper, more primal part, was drawn to this forbidden dance. My heart pounded in my C*******, each beat a drum roll to the crescendo of my actions. I could feel the heat rising, the room growing smaller, the world outside fading away until there was just me and Milo locked in this moment of vulnerability and exploration. My fingers traced lines down his back, each touch sending a shiver through both of us. But then a sound from upstairs stated the spell, the creak of a floorboard, the soft murmur of George stirring in his sleep. My heart stopped, my breath caught in my throat, Milo's ears perked up, his body teasing as he too heard the disturbance. Panic surged through me, a cold wave replacing the heat of the moment. I quickly withdrew my hands, my mind racing with the implications of what had just transpired. What if George had seen? What would he think? Questions swirled in my head, each one more terrifying than the last. I stood, my movements jerky, my eyes darting to the staircase, expecting at any moment to see George appear. His face a mask of confusion or worse, betrayal. Milo, sensing my distress, moved back to his usual spot by the fireplace, his eyes still on me. But now with a look of concern rather than curiosity, the silence returned heavy and oppressive. I sat back down, my hands now folded in my lap, my mind a whirlwind of guilt and confusion. What had I done? What had I allowed myself to feel? The room felt different, now charged with the electricity of what had just occurred and the looming possibility of what might still happen. The grandfather clock continued its relentless ticking, marking the passage of time, each second stretching into eternity as I waited my heart in my throat for George to either return to sleep or come downstairs. The night, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap, holding me in its grasp as I sat there alone with Milo, the echoes of my actions reverberating through the .my story ends here. If you feel that this story is meaningful and brings useful lessons, please like and subscribe to the channel to support me.